The RF 35mm has macro listed in its title. I'm here today to see if this lens is worthy of the macro in this title and to see if it's a good lens for macro photography. To see my full review on this lens, click here, and for more gear reviews and tutorials in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button. The first thing I say, it's not true 1:1 macro. It's a 1:2 macro, which means you can't get super close to your subject like you can with the RF 100mm f2.8. That doesn't mean you can't get some nice photos of it though, because 1:2 is still pretty close. And also, with it being a 35mm, you won't be able to get as much compression as you would like than if you was using an RF 100mm. And because it is a wider 35mm compared to the RF 100mm, you're going to get a lot more of the background in than you would with that lens. But that doesn't mean you can't get some nice macro shots with this lens, and that's what we're here to find out today. Right then, so now we're testing out the macro capabilities of this lens. This is a setup I've got here. I've got it on the tripod because that way I'm going to have to lower the shutter speed to, at the minute I've got it at 1/10 of a second to be able to compensate for the f18 what I've got. And then I've also got 800 ISO, and then I've also got my big Godox light up here lighting down, and then I've got the Aperture MC light lighting down right on the front of the Kiwi. The great thing about the Aperture MC is that it's magnetic, so literally all I have to do is put it onto this little magnetic light I've got here, and it lights up the Kiwi exactly how it is. Basically, but because I'm on 1/10 of a second, if I take the picture like this, I'm going to get some motion blur. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to connect to it through the Canon camera app. Right, so I took a few photos and make sure to get a few just in case a few of them did end up coming out of focus. But basically what I'm going to do in post-processing, normally what I like to do is, especially with this lens, because you can't get true 1:1 and it's a wider focal length, sometimes it's okay to crop in a little bit just so you can focus in on that subject. Make sure you get the right composition still when you do crop in, and you'll be able to see the images coming on screen now. Leave a comment below if you think the lens did a good job, or if you think that the 100mm would be a little bit better. But now I'm going to be taking some photos of the Saxumas and see what they come out as well. I think sometimes it's alright to switch to manual focus. That's what I'm going to try now, because autofocus was not focusing in on what I wanted it to focus. I always think using manual focus for macro photography is way easier than using auto, because auto is too unpredictable sometimes and unreliable. If you can get it into manual focus, set your tripod up, and then really nail on that focus that it won't move, then take your shot, then I think that's the best way to take macro photos. If you're enjoying this video so far, why not hit that like button? It really does help me out. But right now, let's move on to the next one. Right then, so now we're going to be shooting a collectible car. Basically, what I've done, the whole background is basically completely underexposed. Basically, the main source of light shining on the front of it, because it's going to make it look like the car's driving like at night and there's other headlights shining onto the car. So basically, we're going to see how up close and personal we can get using this lens and see what the picture looks like basically. Right then, I think that's alright for now, just to check out how good this macro capability is of this lens. I'm going to get these photos into Lightroom and let me know what you think. Alright then guys, so overall I do actually think this lens can produce good macro photos. Obviously the flaws don't really help. The 1:1 magnification and 35mm wide focal length don't really go well together. If it was like a 1:1 with a 35mm or 100mm but 1:2, I think it would work out a lot more better, because obviously you can get that compression more, or you'll be able to just get closer to your subject. But with both of them, the wider focal length and the 1:2 don't really go well together, as you can see in the photos here, because the main photo that was actually taken, that was the closest the subject could get to it where I wanted to focus, and basically it's really wide, so you can see the background, you can see my laptop in the background, you can see a lot of the plate. When you do crop in though, that's the good thing about the EOS R, because it has a lot of megapixels. When you do crop in, it does make the image, I think, a lot better, and you don't lose a lot of the detail. So if you don't mind cropping in every now and again to get real focused in on the part of the subject that you want to shoot, then I do think this lens can be really good for beginners, because I do think some of these photos are good because they are really nicely sharp. That's really what you want from a macro lens. You want to try and get up close, and you want it to be as sharp as possible. So I do think if you're a beginner, I do think you should save your money and purchase this lens for macro photography, or even maybe look at the 85 macro lens. So if you are a beginner, it is really good to practice macro photography with, like I do. I'll practice with this lens, maybe eventually upgrade into the RF 100mm if you're really into macro. However though, if you're a real macro photography shooter and you really do like macro shots, and you're a pro and you only want the best of the best, then the 35mm really doesn't compare to the 100mm RF. So if you're a pro and you want a macro lens and you're thinking of saving some money and you're going to be using this lens mainly as a macro lens, I suggest you use the money that you're going to use to buy this lens and save up towards the 100mm macro, because even though this lens has way better things to it, the 100mm macro is not just a macro lens, it's also really good for portrait use as well, and a lot of other uses, just like this lens really. Even though these pictures are good, and I would say macro photography, this lens is very good if you want to start getting into it. I'm not saying it's bad or it's unusable. It is a very good starting point if you want to get into macro photography. So basically the question was, is this lens good for macro photography? And I think the answer is yes. You can still get up close and personal with your subject. You can crop in and you can get real into them details. But just because of how good the RF 100mm is, doesn't make this lens bad at macro photography. That lens is for the real pros who wants the best of the best macro photos. And obviously a 35mm lens that costs £500 is nowhere near going to compete with that. But overall, I think this lens is good for macro photography, and I'm going to continue using this lens for macro photography in the future. So if this video did help you out, why don't you hit that like button and then comment below what you think you're going to do. If you're going to get the 35mm or if you've got it, or if you've got the 100mm macro, I really want to know, so leave a comment below. If you want to see more videos like this, gear reviews and tutorials, why don't you hit that subscribe button so you never miss a video in the future. Make sure you got your notification bell turned on so you never miss an upload, and thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I'll see you later.